Welcome to the International Teacher Podcast with your host, Matt the Family Guy, Kent the Cat Guy, Jacqueline from JP Mint, and Greg the Single Guy, bringing you episodes from around the world about the best kept secret in education. You got it, international teaching. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the 101st episode of the ITP. This is our first episode we're actually going to record on video, so you can see I'm waving hello. I am Greg, the Single Guy, and I am here, of course, with JP Mint. How you doing, JP?
Whoop, whoop. Hello from Canada. Just on holidays here in Canada, and we have Kent the Cat Guy.
Hey,
how you doing, Kent?
I'm great. I was singing the Canadian National Anthem earlier in honor of JP Mint's visit to Canada.
All right. Well, this show is not about you, Kent. It's not about JP. It's not about me. This one is our guest, Giselle, and Giselle is coming to us from Spain currently, but she lives and teaches teaches in Morocco. So welcome to the show, Giselle.
Thank you. Gracias.
Welcome.
De nada.
Merci.
Wow.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited that you asked me to come on the show.
So we usually get started here, Giselle, on the show. Just give us a little elevator version of your journey into the international and where it fits in with you. How about that?
Okay. I'm a New England girl, and I had been living in Boston for about 14 years when I decided I need to change my life. And on sort of a whim and my own personal story, I decided to move to the Dominican Republic and fulfill a lifelong dream of learning another language and living in another country. And I had this idea because I had been a designer and a design manager for many years, and I also had a lot of fine artists in my life, that I was going to have a gallery or a gallery presence and go to different art shows. And I soon discovered that I'm not very good as a business person on my own. And I found myself distracted. I got involved. I was living in an area of Santo Domingo where there was kind of a poorer area right behind the apartment where I was living. And I got sort of involved in some children's lives, and I started advocating for them. And as they were teaching me Spanish, I was teaching them the alphabet and how to read. And before long, people that I met through my travels in Santo Domingo, they suggested that I apply to one of the American schools there. I don't know if I'm allowed to say names, but at the
Please.
Carol Morgan?
near one there.
Sure, go ahead.
Morgan, yes, at Carol Morgan. And I applied for a job there, and as luck would have it, they were looking for a part-time art teacher. And I had never taught before in my life other than this experience with these kids. And it seemed like a perfect fit. I'm a native English speaker, surprisingly. and I had an art background from working as a designer and a design manager for a long time. And once I started working there, my principal at the time came to me and he said, this seems to be a really good fit, but I have to tell you, you kind of don't have a future as a part-time local hire. So
Wow.
Thing about it. So he mentored me and advised me on what to do. And I got my certification online and began.
How did you do that?
Because
Because I think a lot of our listeners would like to hear, how did you do that, get your certification?
Good question. Okay, so at the time, my father was in Florida, and I went online a little bit, and this is already, we're going back like 14 years ago now. But I went through the Florida Department of Education, I think it's FLDOE, and I found a state university that offered an online program, which was, because I was interested in teaching in the subject area that my bachelor's degree was already in, which was art. It was pretty seamless for me. If I had wanted to be a social studies teacher, it would have been a different story. I would have had to maybe go back and get a degree, or I don't even know. But because my degree was in art, It was fairly straightforward because I was already teaching at a school as I was getting my certification. The program allowed me to ask one of the teachers there to be my sort of cooperating teacher or sponsoring teacher so that she could oversee lessons and that sort of thing. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
No, that's great. And I think
But
it
think
helps.
it probably varies. Yeah. Yeah, I think it probably varies state to state. But since then, I've known other people who've done sort of similar things. I think Florida
Did you have
is
to
one
be
of
online? Sorry, Giselle, if I may. Did you have to be online live with the students and an instructor while you did those classes? Could you do them at your own pace? How did that work out for you?
most of them were. We're going back a while now, but it was called Teach First. That was the name of the program. I'm not sure if it's still around or not.
Yeah.
And from what I remember, it was at our own pace, but we did have to interact with other people in our what is that called? The group that you do it with your cohort. Yeah, you had to we had to communicate with our cohort. We had to communicate with teachers. I have kind of this is, for some reason, this is standing out. This was a really funny memory of mine. Is I remember communicating with a teacher via email, and having had a background in graphic design and doing a lot of communications in email communications and with marketing, typically it's really typical to use all caps and to bold and to use colors. And it's more just when you're working with younger designers or if you're working with an account manager and you want to call attention to certain things. It's just a way to have clearer communication. And at this time, I don't know if it's still this way or not, because I just, once I get scolded for something, I sort of never do it again. But I had written something to one of the instructors in all caps, bold and red. And she wrote back to me.
How dare
She's
you?
like, I find your way of communicating very aggressive. And I was like, oh, God, like I didn't mean it to be aggressive. I actually wanted to be easy. Like I wanted it to be easier to be understood. But anyway, that's just kind of a funny memory. So
How dare you on the board?
Oh,
How
the
dare you?
tone, Giselle.
oh, I know. Scary.
So ultimately you moved on from the DR. Is that right?
I did kind of reluctantly because I really loved it there. And, but there was just no way to make that, at least at that point, there was really no way to make that transition from being a local hire to an expat status to get the different benefits. And I mean, not to mention it wasn't even full time. So yeah, so I moved on and you guys, I'm sure you all know who John Magana is, right? From Search Associates.
Search
You've heard the name
Associates.
before. So yeah, so he was still very involved at that point. And I remember calling Search Associates on the phone and he picked up the phone and he was just wonderful and fatherly and spent about an hour and a half on the phone, giving me really great advice. And I had it in my head that I really wanted to stay in Latin America because I had just learned Spanish. So I was really excited about that. And I still love Latin America so much. I know a lot of you do too, right? I think
Absolutely.
So I know you guys are big
Absolutely.
Latin America fans, yes. So I really, really had my heart set on Latin America, and John Magana was just like, look, he's like, I know you do. He said, but keep an open mind. This is going to be your first official post because you can't even really count this local one. So he said, just, go for what feels right and don't get stuck on the idea that it has to be in Latin America or in a Spanish speaking country. So I just let go of those feelings and I ended up accepting a job in Morocco and I never left.
Wow.
Yeah. So I've been in Morocco.
So how
now.
long have you been in Morocco now then?
I'm going into my 13th year.
Oh, wow.
And what school in Morocco, can you say?
Yes, sure. I'm at Casablanca American School.
Great.
Yeah.
Are you studying Arabic while you're there?
Oh, studying? No. I mean, I'm attempting. I actually got my French up to speed pretty fast because it's a francophone country. And that was that was just easier. I had a little bit of knowledge of French, and then speaking Spanish, I was able to go in and learn enough French to get by. And in Morocco, they speak Darija, which is the local dialect, and there's a lot of French mixed in with it. So I do know some words in Darija, but I don't master it. It's embarrassing, and but what can I say? And even most of my husband I ended up marrying a local French Moroccan, and he's really more Francophone. He speaks more French than Arabic. So yeah, I'm kind of surrounded by French and English speakers for the most part. Yeah.
Morocco has always fascinated me because of that blend. I felt a kinship, maybe as a Canadian, with that French and English. The French and Arabic is always being blended, and it reminds me of my East Coast, where my family speak French and English combined. Like we all speak both languages really fluently. So we're seamlessly always integrating the two languages. And I think that's how it is in Morocco too. A lot of the speakers will blend languages.
It's very much like that. And then if you go to the north of Morocco, where there's more of a Spanish influence, it's the dialect there is different, and it's completely influenced by Spanish as well. I was watching a movie the other day, and there was a scene taking place where they had Moroccan people in the movie in Spain, and they were speaking Arabic. They were speaking Moroccan Arabic, but it was all mixed with Spanish. I didn't hear any French words mixed in. So it's interesting how it's like that. And of course, now the younger generation, they all just want to learn English. So if you attempt to say anything in Arabic and even in French, like everybody just wants to speak English.
Yes. Yeah, I've had the same experience. Now, Giselle, there's a lot of interesting things. I'd love to hear a little bit more about Morocco, also your pet rescue projects. But I do understand in an ITP first, you have a few questions for the host. Did you want to take a moment and ask some of your questions before we go on hearing about you?
Yeah, I had a couple of questions, and one of my questions was, I was given really great advice when I first got the job at Carol Morgan, and it was by a really great woman who I'm still good friends with. And she said, you're going to, I had met her through a book club prior to joining the school community, and it was, a mix of people from all over. At any rate, she said, it's going to be really tempting when you first start at Carol Morgan to just want to hang out with the American teachers because it's going to feel really, really comfortable. She said, but you're going to do yourself a great disservice if you don't get to know the local hires. They are just, they're wonderful people. You're going to get to know the country better, the city better. You're going to have a fuller, more richer experience if you do that. So don't make that mistake that so many people make that's what she said. I'm not saying it's a mistake, but she said, don't fall into that. Try, put yourself out there and get to know the locals. And I've always kind of shared that advice to people coming onboarding at CAS. And often I'm the teacher that the director or the principal will say, hey, we're interviewing someone and you've been here the longest, or the longest local foreign hire. Can you talk to them? And inevitably people will ask for advice. And I've always shared that. And I always say, get to know the local hires because you'll have the chance to maybe learn some Arabic or learn some French or learn more about the local culture. People are really warm and hospitable. So how has that been for all of you? Like, how do you have that balance of friends that are local mixed with the expat or immigrant community or whatever?
I'll take a shot at that. Our current school where Greg and I work, I won't speak on behalf of Greg, it's predominantly North American, Canadian, U.S. passport employees. We've just started getting more and more local hires into the mix. So I would say that we're just at the beginning of that process, that you've had well over a decade to sort of integrate yourself in with that. And so Speaking for myself, I think we have still that to look forward to. I will say this, that in our neck of the woods, and maybe Morocco too, is that there's a little bit more division between men and women. So, if I, as a male, approach sort of the younger female locals, it's they get a little nervous around me, but most people do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say we're at the beginning of that process. But I would say that it's something that I think, from my experience in Yemen, when you get to know people who work at your school who are locals, you find that they're talented, they have amazing backgrounds, that if you never take the time to talk to them and learn about them, you'll never learn just how amazing lives people in your host country will live, and the people you work.
Well said.
JP?
Greg? Oh, me? So Giselle, I was thinking while you were asking the question about the various countries I've lived in, and I can tell you that only 2 out of 5 foreign countries that I worked in and taught in, only 2 of the schools did I have local friends. And it's very like a wide stretch. It was Turkey and it was China. So in Turkey and China, I had local friends that were employees of the same school as I was. But in the other countries, so Oman, in Korea, and in Mexico, I found it very hard to blend that professional and personal and when I say friends, I mean I've been in their houses. But in those other countries,
Right.
it was hard to. And I think one of the challenges is that they get a little foreign fatigue. The 2 years, 3 years, the foreigners leave, come in. And so I think in their defense, they might say, well, yeah, great, I'll be your friend. And then in 2 years, you're going to be leaving. So it's quite possible that they kind of have that, hesitance to form the friendships. But in Turkey, I've got to say, one of the reasons why I have and still have great Turkish friends is because the school decided that the cohort that was coming in would be blended. And the Turks would go through the orientation with the foreigners. And so that solidified it for us. Like, we just became lifelong friends because of that orientation. And then, of course, I stayed for 8 years at that same school. So those friendships were very, very solid. For China, I did the very similar thing, but also I was the head of boarding. So I was living with a lot of the local Chinese staff in the boarding house. And so I got to know them as well through that. So I would say for sure, I would recommend as much as possible to get with the local staff, but just understand their perspective, and they're coming in and they're quite possibly might sort of hold you off a little bit until you've either shown some longevity or, you've shown such understanding to their culture, and you're not just going to put their culture under a microscope and then in 2 years leave.
Yeah, that makes sense completely. I mean, even I find that I even do that, right? I've been at the school so long, and I see so many people come, they stay for 2 years. Sometimes they even break contracts. It's like, oh, how much effort do I really want to put into this friendship? It's like I wait after the first year, and I'm like, that person looks interesting. I'm going to ask them, if they want to go grab dinner or a cup of coffee. So
Yeah, it took me 7 years to warm up to Greg, I'll be honest. Still
I
working
still
on
haven't
it.
worn up to Kent.
What do you think, Greg? Experience with friending locals? What do you think?
Oh, I have 1,000 stories, and I'm vastly different. Out of 7 schools, there's only 2 that I haven't really embedded myself into the locals. And one of those is our school right now. It's like a bubble. Like Kent was saying, a lot of our locals, we don't have a lot of local staff or even local maintenance or local workers. Everyone's from different countries. So that's difficult at this school. So I won't use that as an example. And the best example I can give you, it was fantastic. I mean, Venezuela was probably the highlight of my career for partying and for getting into the area. And it was just, I mean, I knew almost every maintenance staff member that were all locals. I knew the local teachers, and it culminated in what we called Goyo Fest. And the story behind that is that, and I was there for 4 years, so it did take a little, I start off right off the bat. First day, I'm like talking to people, learning the language or relearning the language, talking to the locals, trying to get out there, get out of that bubble. We had to live out into the environment too. We didn't live on like a little camp, or we weren't segregated. We were really into the area. So my neighbors were all locals, Spanish, Venezuelans, right, etc. So the culmination was Goyo Fest. Gregorio is of course, Spanish. The name, short name for Gregorio is Goyo.
I didn't
depending
know
on
that
where you
photo,
live.
no.
Oh, you didn't? Okay.
No,
Well, depending on where you live, they say it differently, like Gojo or Goyo or Goyito, whatever it is, all right? Anyway, we had Goyo Fest, and what it started was I realized at Christmas time, I had stayed around 1 year, and I had a girlfriend from the area, a local, and I spent Christmas in Venezuela at the school, and I walked into school one day, and all of our maintenance staff were sitting around, and they had these big bags of barbecue meat. And I said, "Where's all the beer?" That was my first thing I said. "Where's the beer?" They're like, "Well, we don't have any. They only provide us with the food." So I said, "Okay, I'll be right back." So I went to the liquor store, I went to the beer shop, and I went and got a whole bunch of beer. And I sat there with them for the whole Christmas dinner on the school grounds. They were all bussed in, etc. And long story short, because of that, I invited all of them to a huge barbecue for my birthday, which was June 15th. And that year, so it was like the second or third year I was there, second year. And they all showed up, and I provided everything except for another one of the secretary brought the meats for the barbecue. The head of maintenance did all the barbecuing for me. All of the cleaning ladies showed up with their families. It was just amazing. And it happened every year after that. And I was giving them the party in honor of sharing with them and doing something nobody else did and mixing our staff with the locals. And it was, all year long we'd talk about the Goyo Fest coming up, and I didn't even call it Goyo Fest. All of the locals started calling it Goyo Fest, but it was actually not a party for me. It was for all of them. But it started to snowball. So my 4th year there, my apartment had about 60 to 80 people around the pool barbecuing, and I spent so much money on it, but I got up and left the next morning because all the ladies that were the cleaning maintenance ladies were like, "Goyo, vaya, and then no te preocupa, right? Don't worry about it. We're going to take care of it." So I just left everything. It was just crazy. I had this massive party with 8 grocery carts full of trash, and we've cleaned up after ourselves, but my apartment was in no way any shape for me to leave, right? Usually you clean up your apartment before you leave the country, but I didn't even have to do that. And it was just crazy. So I guess my whole idea is that was the pinnacle of my overseas experience, because I was dating outside of the school with locals. I was partying with locals on weekends, every weekend. I learned the best Spanish. I learned so much Spanish by integrating with them. We became very good friends, a couple of them. One of my best friends, his name is Ruben, so shout out to Ruben. And I just got to see him in Miami because he's moved since after COVID. He moved with his daughter, with his son, and with his wife to Miami. So when I fly into Miami, it's surrounded by Venezuelans at the airport. Yeah. So we went out for Venezuelan lunch, and I got to see his wife and his child again, and it was amazing. So they're lifetime friends. And he's just one example of some of the friends I made because of mixing and taking care of the local staff a little bit, because there's a huge difference in many countries between what they make and what the expats make. And no matter what, if they're teaching or if they're part of school or if they're in the office, whatever that is, or in charge of transportation, whatever that is, there's a huge discrepancy. So I like to give back to that staff, and it's happened in 5 or 6 countries I've been in. It's been like that. So for me, it's a great question we don't talk enough about. But thank you for asking us all that. I'm very passionate about it. And in almost every school that I've been in, I've made it a point to reach out to them because they rarely will not want to hang out or learn from me if I'm the one reaching out to them, right? JP, you mentioned that before, is that sometimes they might be overwhelmed with the expats coming and going. And Giselle, you mentioned that too. Like you see them come and go every 2 years. But it's even in Cambodia when I was there, I was only there for 2 years, but I left and I had great local friends. That's how I got to see the whole country. And it giving back, and it's like a two-way street. They love to share their culture with you in most cases. And if you're lucky enough to make some friends locally, I think it broadens your horizons and it opens up so much more than if you're just in that bubble of the school. How's that for an answer?
I'm sorry, we weren't recording. Can you repeat that? We dropped the signal about 10 minutes ago.
Kent, I just said yes. That's all I said was yes.
Giselle, I have a question for you. I would say probably about 13 years ago, I became sort of the cat guy. I've had cats my whole life. I know you're kind of a dog gal over there, but one of the things that
what
really...
What did you call our guest? Be nice,
7
Kent.
cats.
I am...
7.
Oh, wow.
Oh my God,
well,
7?
no, I mean, that's going to be my next... That's going to lead into my next question.
All right, let's take a moment for a little commercial about how to get in touch with us. You can, of course, find all 4 of us at the itpexpat.com. That's www.itpexpat.com.
Or you could also find us at email at internationalteacherpodcast@gmail.com. We look forward to hearing from you.
Or if you're into Facebook, we have a new Facebook group at www.facebook.com/groups/ITPexpat, where you can find all kinds of inside information about ITP Expat.
You can also find us on Instagram at ITPXpats. That's with an S. ITPXpats is our handle.
All right, and thank you, listeners. We have over 100 countries represented by our listeners, and though we're not monetized, we are here for you, and we would like to thank all of you for listening. So let's get back to the show.
One of the things, being an international teacher, that really gets my I would say I'm not an angry person, but one thing that makes me angry is when people adopt pets and then they leave their pets behind, or they abandon their pets. And it's something that I've seen in all the places that I've been a teacher. And I know that you have a passion for animals. You have a passion for pets. You do animal rescue. I was hoping you could tell us a few words about that. And it sounds like you have a house full of pets there. So what can you tell us the story behind that?
Well, some men trap their women into staying in a country by, golden handcuffs or getting them pregnant over and over. No, he just kept letting me bring in more animals. To the point where I can't leave because it's just too many. Can't leave with 9 pets, right? 2 dogs and 7 cats. All right, so there is a huge homeless animal situation in Morocco. And it's like this in so many countries, right? I mean, it's even still like this to a certain extent in developed countries.
Are some of these animals that might have been homed once, or are they more of a sort of a feral colony?
The majority of them are born in the street. There are, unfortunately, more and more people in Morocco that are buying purebred cats and dogs, and they just acquire them like a toy, and after a few months, it's lucky if the nanny or the driver or the maid take pity on it and decide to care for it. In most cases, they just get tossed out. So, and then these pure breeds are, of course, then they're mixing with the local population of colonies as well. So it's ongoing. And then we get so many animals, it seems to get, maybe some people feel like, oh, I hear there's some Americans that are taking care of animals at the school. So we get some dumped there that have clearly been living inside nice homes or villas and that they don't look like they've spent their life on the street, but all of a sudden they show up at the school. So it's just an ongoing problem. Sometimes I think they just talk to each other and they're like, hey, go over there. There's a nice lady and some guardians. They're gonna hook you up really well. Yeah, when it's even worse to me when foreign hire teachers come in and adopt and then don't take them with them. That hasn't happened if it's happened, it's been kept a secret from me because maybe they're afraid of what I might do. I don't know. But I know that if, as much as possible, I talked to people last year. Unfortunately, she's not there anymore, but the principal at the time, she let me talk to the whole staff. At one point, I got some space to speak and say, look, a lot of you are new. You're going to see lots of puppies and kittens that need homes. Do not even think of adopting one unless you're planning on taking it with you, because no one wants the puppies and kittens. No one will want your old dog or your old cat if you leave in a couple of years. So if you adopt it, it's just like at home. It's for life. If you're thinking of maybe going to a country after this where it's going to be difficult to bring a pet with you. Like, I know people have a lot of issues sometimes going to China, I've heard. I said, maybe if you think China's in the near future, maybe just don't adopt. So, in terms of helping the local population, and this is obviously something that didn't happen overnight, it's been gradual, but like all schools, we have an after-school activities program, and my after-school activities is called Art and Animals. And so I invite another benefit of being there for so long is I know a lot of people in the creative community outside of the school. So I invite them to come in and give one-day workshops to my students that are in the Art and Animals Club. And we also do fundraisers. We design Valentines and sell the Valentines. So the membership dues, as well as the different fundraising events, bake sales, that sort of thing, Valentine sales, helps to kind of subsidize the work that we try to do, myself and my husband and a couple of local friends. And there's a security guard at school who's, what probably doesn't make more
So
than
the funds you're
$100
talking
a month.
about are probably going to sterilization and fixing the street animals so they don't keep reproducing.
Exactly. It goes to sterilization, vaccination, emergency medical care, and then just food for various cat colonies in Casablanca. So it's, the fundraising that we do probably doesn't even cover half of it, but it's better than it's certainly better than nothing. There's, like I said, there's this amazing security guard, Akram, shout out to Akram. And he is just an angel. He spends, 6 days a week working 12 hours a day. And then he spends his evenings going around feeding cat colonies, tending to sick and injured animals. And when he finds kittens that don't have their mother, he can sometimes spend half the night looking for a nursing mother.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So he's somebody that I've kind of recently in the last year and a half teamed up with. And it's, I just help to try to fund it. I mean, he does so much of the hard work. So it really does, such a corny expression, but it really takes a village. And now we're dealing with, in 2030, FIFA has awarded World Cup to Morocco, Spain, and Portugal. So they are now cleansing the streets of so many street animals, and there's just a plan for a mass extermination. It's awful. Even animals that have been, dogs that have been tagged, as well as cats whose ears have been clipped. They're just scooping them up and killing them all.
What's your messaging around that? Do you can you appeal to the powers that be? Can you influence that at all? I mean, it's really swimming upstream on this one, isn't it?
It's really, really hard. It's really hard. There's a new governor that came in, and he's doing a lot of horrible, horrible things. responsible for killing a lot of the animals. I mean, as much as possible, I know a lot of parents at the school, and they try, they're doing their best to, to help and to try to influence, but it's really uphill. It's really uphill.
Giselle, if people wanted to contribute, volunteer, maybe they're listening in Morocco, they want to volunteer, maybe contribute some money. Do you have some resources people can reach out to you?
I do. I have a GoFundMe, and I also have a couple of veterinarians that I work with. People could, if they didn't want to go the GoFundMe route, they could contact these veterinarians and do, deposit directly with them. But unless they're right in Morocco, that might be difficult. So it would probably be easier for the GoFundMe. I don't have it off the top of my head.
We'll include it in the show notes.
Yeah, if you email it we'll put it in the show notes. Where are those veterinarians trained? Are they trained right there in Morocco, or do they train in France or in Europe? Where do they come from?
The two vets that we mostly work with, one was trained in Spain, and the other one, I think he studied in France. I'm pretty sure he studied in France. Great. But the one that I've been working with for many, many, many years, and she was actually a hookup of one of the local higher teachers, a French teacher that I met the first year I was at CAS. It's her daughter-in-law, and she always calls my Frida, who I brought with me from the Dominican Republic, she always calls her patient number one, and not in the sense that she got all of the other animals sick, but just
not patient ground zero.
Yeah. She was her first patient, and she's like, I think the oldest at this point. I mean, I got her in 2009, so sorry, art teacher here, not math teacher. Frida's pretty old.
Don't ask Kent. He doesn't know math.
I can't do the math either.
So, Giselle, how many different animals do you have in your apartment now? You have seven cats?
No, we're in a house now. This is sort of another story, but a little over 3 years ago, my father could no longer live on his own in Florida. So we brought him to Morocco to live with us and rented a big house. So when we were in the apartment in the center of the city, we had 4 cats. Yes, we had 4 cats at that point. And then once we moved to a bigger home, then we acquired a few more cats, and then decided that was the moment to get dogs, or to get a dog. And that's when we got Halston. And then this past spring, we ended up getting another dog. She was a dog that was rounded up years ago, we had her vaccinated and sterilized, and she was living on the street right near the school. And the governor decided that he didn't want her there anymore, and she was hauled off to the place where they killed them. And fortunately, because make contributions to that evil place, they alert us when animals that they know that we're taking care of come in, and somebody knew that there was money to be had by not putting her down. So we were able to get her, but at that point we realized it's just not safe for her to be on the street anymore. So that's how we ended up with a second dog, and we got her Spanish passport this summer while we're in Spain, and we'll be bringing her with us next year. And the reason
Are those really tiny passports, like small ones?
No, they're like the size of like a human being's passport.
I would think humans need a big passport, but like a little, a little cat passport, a little doggy passport.
I always joke. I'm like, well, my children are European before I am. I don't know how fair that is that they get their European citizenship.
So you have 9. You have 9 at home
animals.
with you.
We have 9 animals, but we don't travel with the cats because, well, Kent, this cats are often, equally or maybe even more attached to their home than they are to their humans, and it's tiring enough to travel with one.
They might get loose on the plane, right? You never know.
We drive. We take our car and we drive to the north of Morocco to Tangier. We hop on the ferry with the car. And it brings us to Spain, and that's why and then we stayed, almost the whole summer with our one dog this is the 3rd year in a row, but next year we'll be bringing Marilyn too. So she's a very, very low key dog, so it should be pretty easy, I hope. Yeah.
Funny,
So
you should
Giselle,
talk about the things that you. Go ahead, JP.
Ken. No, go ahead, Ken.
No, I was just going to transition because Giselle was talking about things that she travels with, and I thought maybe, JP, this would be an excellent opportunity for us to ask our questions of Giselle.
Okay, well, before we do that, I just wanted to briefly talk about something that Giselle mentioned where you had an aging father in Florida, and I know a lot of our listeners, especially veteran long-term international career educators, they also have aging parents, as I think we all do here as co-hosts. Tell us about the move from the U.S. to Morocco, to where you are. You had your father come and live with you.
Oh, okay. Let's see. So it was it was April of 2021, and my father was living. Yeah. It was 2021. And my father was still living, he was living in an independent situation, completely independent in Boca Raton, Florida, in an apartment building for all different age people. So you know what it's like in the United States. Even if you're friendly with the doorman, if they suspect that you're not well, that they haven't seen you in a while, they can't just go into your apartment without a real reason. It's against the law. So I typically would talk to my father on the phone every day, and I couldn't reach him. It had been probably 2 days. I couldn't get a hold of him. I started calling some of his friends and saying, have you heard from my dad? And by the way, his friends are younger than I am. And anyway, another story.
Good for him. Good for him.
Yes, but the problem is with having friends that are that much younger than you is that they're all really busy with their own lives, relationships, children, high pressure jobs. They don't always have time to be checking up on you. So there's something to be said about being friends with the Yenta next door who's always going to know what's, if they haven't seen you for a few hours. At any rate, one of his good friends sent his nephew over, and I guess this sort of alerted the doorman, like, okay, yeah, it's true, I haven't seen Les in a while. So they got themselves into the apartment. They had to call EMTs to bring him to the hospital. He had fallen and was out on the floor for easily 48 hours before he was found.
Oh no.
He was starting to die.
I was going to say that's about that limit, right?
Yeah, he was completely delusional by the time he was in the hospital because he'd been so dehydrated. When they brought me, because I just started freaking out, calling the police station, the hospitals, nobody had him. Finally, he was there, but he was there. We're going like on 3 days now where I haven't been able to get in touch with him. No one's gotten in touch with me. And he was first in there as a John Doe, and then they figured out who he was. And the nurse case manager said, like, you need to get here as soon as you can and sort all of this out, because he is now officially guilty of self-neglect. He can no longer be on his own. So you either need to move here and move in with him, or put him into some sort of an assisted living where he can have, he wasn't really ready for a nursing home, but he was in need of somebody to really, really be there with him all the time. And he was refusing this, and I couldn't do anything about it. For the year or so prior, when I saw that things were not going well, he's a stubborn guy and his way or the highway. And I'm sort of the best thing, as awful as it was that this happened, it's probably the best thing that happened, because at this point he had no choice. And I said, look, you can go to, once he was sort of thinking clearly again, I said, you can go to an assisted living, or we can rent a bigger house together in Morocco, and you'll have full-time nurses or nurses' aides living with us to do stuff with you. You'll be able to continue to go out
and
to
lots of cats
every day. And I didn't say that. He's not really an animal.
That wasn't a selling point.
I have to live with him. He's got to live with the cats, and dogs. I always think it's kind of ironic that I never had dogs growing up, because he's not an animal person. We had cats, but no dogs.
Oh, crap.
And And I think like it's ironic it's because of my father now. I mean, we never would have moved to a big house in the burbs if it hadn't in like kind of this gated community if we hadn't brought my father to live with us.
How's he doing with the cats and dogs?
It doesn't affect him too much because his living space is sort of on the first floor, and we've got a couple of cats that are out like kind of garden kitties. And if they come in, they really don't, they kind of stay away from him. The dogs are mostly, dogs stick to the people who give them attention. And then the other cats are upstairs because there's nurses. The nurses have a bedroom upstairs. My husband has his office upstairs. We have a cat's room, our room, they have enough space. They don't, Well,
wow, it's a lot of space. That's awesome.
It's a lot of space. It's not easy to find a house where you've got living space for one person, meaning like they have an ensuite bedroom and living and kitchen that they can access, and then a set of stairs where we can have our own life and privacy, and he can't just, my father, he can't just barge in whenever he wants to. So, living with a person with dementia. So,
it's one of those perks of living in the Middle East versus Europe. You can have more space for living.
Yes.
For those, I think JP was right. There are more people than we imagine who are in your shoes, who are faced with decisions about their aging parents. How difficult was it to do the paperwork, to get permission to bring your father over with you? And what advice would you have if you had one piece of advice for the teachers out there that might be facing the same questions?
Well, I would say you have to obviously the first thing is finances, and you have to, and it depends on the country. For my father, it was, pretty easy to bring him in as an American citizen, bringing him into Morocco. You have to make sure that at least in Morocco that you can show that you have enough income to be able to afford to rent a place, because obviously at this point, this rental is beyond what the school would allocate for me. So that would be something to consider. If the school normally pays for your, if the school is paying for your apartment, is it going into your paycheck and then you're paying the landlord? Or do they pay directly? And if they do, would they be willing to work out something else with you? So you have to sort of sort that out with your school and with the landlord. That's definitely something to consider. And then healthcare providers. I'm very happy with the medical care that I received in Morocco, or that I've received so far. So I was very comfortable bringing my father there. There's enough doctors that can talk to him in English that he can communicate well with, because obviously at his age and with dementia, he's not going to be learning any new languages. So that's something to consider. Is it going to be okay with doctors? We were really fortunate, and I found amazing nurses that live in with us. It's a young couple, and they're psychiatric nurses. So it's not even, it's better than nurses' aides. I feel like he's really getting a much better quality of life in Morocco than if he had stayed in the United States and had to go into an assisted living and a studio apartment.
That's
with
awesome.
Different people coming in and out. And let's face it, when family members are not close by, elder abuse is a real thing, and it's a real thing, and he's not necessarily the easiest person. So, but I'm right there. So, yeah.
But as you mentioned, you did present him with a choice. You did have two possibilities. Yeah. And thankfully he made the choice that was easier for you and a better life for him. So he married those two. So that was lovely. And I wanted to know a little bit about you touched upon it, the process. He wouldn't have obviously a work visa, but is he attached to your visa, or does he have his own retiree in Morocco visa?
Yeah, it's fairly simple for people to come to Morocco and retire. There's a huge expat community, not in Casablanca, unfortunately, but a lot of retired expats come from France, especially, but also some from Spain, some from Germany, some from Holland, and they're mostly in Marrakesh. So there's the precedent for it. It's just Morocco is pretty welcoming for it. So. Yeah.
JP, are you gonna here we break? This video is throwing me off. Giselle, your first answer is going to be your dad, but when you go from different countries to live in and work in, are there three things that you take with you? And I guess if we say the cats or the dog and then your dad, those are all part of your family. So how about some other things?
My husband. Well,
We need to premise this. We say
unfortunately
no
for the
people,
show,
no animals.
No people, no animals. Okay, so like if suddenly my husband and my father and my 9 animals were no longer in the picture, what would I bring with me? Is that what you mean?
Or in
Assuming
addition
you
to
bring
that.
them,
In
what else on
addition.
top of that? In
Yes.
addition to that.
Yeah.
Okay. This is like a fantasy that I would actually be able to leave. I don't think I'll be able to leave.
We're thinking like
But
comfort
if I could
stuff.
leave, like if I
Yeah.
could go to my, it's funny. I was listening to your to the show about Colombia. I love Colombia too. It's for me, Colombia is like a magical, wonderful place. So if I could go to Colombia, what would I bring? My and I could only bring 3 things, really, outside of
No, you can choose your top 3 things that you might bring with you.
the top 3 things. Okay. Well, jewelry.
Good.
Yeah. And I have a wooden spoon that my grandmother brought with her when she emigrated from Austria to the United States in the early 1900s. So I take that wooden spoon with me everywhere.
Very cool.
And pictures of my mom who's passed away.
Pictures.
Oh,
yeah.
I have
There
to
we
add one
go.
more. My
Go for
teddy
it.
bear. My teddy bear from when I was like a baby.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. And see, this is why we
I
ask
like your
this
answers.
question.
No.
That's very nice.
Because
Yeah.
it gives us a picture of who you are and what's important to you outside of course, people and animals. But it gives us a picture. You know, we
Yes.
learned so much about you just having those items. And the other question
But the next
that we
question
have
actually gives us
for
a
our
picture of you as
guests-
well. Any run-in with the authorities in a country you worked?
In a country I worked,
Does that mean that there's a bunch of other countries out there that you've been?
Wanted posters.
yeah, there's been a few. Let's see. No, I'm just kidding. There really hasn't been a few. I don't know that I've had any run-ins with authorities since I left as an adult, but we had a. Can I share like a childhood story, or
Please,
go
does
ahead.
it really be from my teaching career?
Whatever.
Okay. All right. I was 10 years old, and my parent. It was 1980. So remember what was happening in the United States and in Colombia in the 80s. And my parents decided that they wanted to go on vacation. Yep, ping pong. My parents decided but they were not partiers at all. But they decided that they wanted to go to Colombia for a family vacation. So we went to Cartagena de los Indios for a February vacation, and we spent the week at a lovely hotel. I think that's when I was bit by the travel bug. I met a little girl from Argentina who was there on vacation with her family. We are still friends. I am actually mother to her second son. Yep. So it's a friendship that's lasted a lifetime. And while we were there, the plumbing in the hotel broke down.
Oh my God.
This is like, okay, so other things were happening in the 80s too, right? Like people didn't use sunscreen. So my father was just, completely brown as a berry and greasy with, 4-day stubble on his face and a leather cowboy hat and probably like old bell-bottom jeans. Well, we get to the airport to leave, and the authorities took my mother and I and put us in a separate room, and we're like, okay, how do you know this guy?
Oh my God. He looks like a campesino.
They thought he was like a drug smuggler, and they went through every single, all of my things, all of my mother's things, all of my father's things. I think we missed our flight. They detained us for several hours before they finally let us go. And when they finally let us get on the plane, there was no apology. There was nothing. There was
It's
just
like a movie.
They said
Oh.
they said you might not want to. They said maybe you should go somewhere else on vacation because next time we
my
won't
God.
be so easy on you. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Wow,
True story.
that's a tangle with the pre-TSA, right? Oh,
Yes,
wow.
yes.
Oh, that's a great
Great
one.
story.
I
Yeah,
didn't know
like
your,
you
your
say,
father was Don Johnson.
Don Johnson.
John,
The rolled up
yeah,
sleeves.
he was a sight to behold.
All right, well, let's
Oh my
take this
gosh.
around the horn. The single guy, Greg, any final thoughts as I go around the horn?
I'm still processing all of this. I love
All right,
the
I'll go
fact
to
that
JP. I'll come back to you. JP Mint, final thoughts.
Just cut him off at the knees. I think he was going to process out loud.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead,
Are you over
JP.
there?
That's fine. Nope, this is new. Go ahead.
Anything from you, JP?
Okay. I want to thank Giselle for coming on the show and just bringing so many new topics to the show, and that's why I invited her on. I thought she has a lot to talk about, and so thank you very much for accepting that invitation, Greg.
I'm still processing.
We'll check back next week with Greg. Just final thoughts from you, my darling.
Me?
Final thoughts from
Oh,
me?
her.
Well, this was really, really fun. Thank you for inviting me to be on the show. Thank you for writing in the invitation that this should be fun and it's not an interview, because that is maybe the most, like, the questions to prepare me were great. Listening to your podcast was amazing. I loved it. And I'm
Thank you.
definitely going to become a fan of it. But just that one sentence saying, like, come up with some of your own questions, engage. This should be fun. It shouldn't be an interview. Like, whoever came up with that, it's brilliant. I love it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Greg, final thought from you?
I'm still processing.
Okay, you know what? I'm going to thank everyone. We're going to close this out, and we'll tape your final thoughts in another week. I would love to thank our special guest today, Giselle. Keep your eyes out for Giselle's link about her animal rescue and how you can support her with the GoFundMe. Keep your eyes out for that. Thank you, Giselle, for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
I would like to thank JP Mint. You can find her at jpmintconsulting.com. Thank you, JP Mint. Enjoy your last couple weeks in Canada. Yeah. I would also like to thank Greg, the single guy, who's busy processing. You could find Greg's latest book, International Teaching, the Best Kept Secret in Education, at www.amazon.com or wherever you find your finer books. Thank you, single guy.
Brought to you by Maplewood Meats of Green Bay.
You haven't met meat till you've met our meat. Maplewood Meats. www.maplewoodmeats.com. I'm Kent, the cat guy. You can find me as always in room 303. We'll keep the light on for you. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, guys.
All right, don't
I
go
thought
away
of
yet.
something.
Hold on.
Hey,
Don't
hold
go.
on,
I
just-
thought of
you thought of
something.
something.
Giselle.
Okay.
Yeah. Hey, Giselle, I want you, don't be angry, but when I leave here, I'm going to leave Kent. I mean, we're not supposed to leave animals behind, but I'm leaving Kent when I leave this country. All right.